Yeah, welcome to the Proof of Coverage podcast, Harrison. We're looking forward to having you here, jumping into this conversation. I was actually pretty new to the more digital side of DeepIn in terms of like CDN, kind of the back end kind of architecture of the internet. So it was really interesting to learn about how it works on the Web 2 side, what you guys are trying to do on the Web 3 side, and also just kind of compare and contrast it with a lot more of the kind of more physical world DeepIns, like the Heliums providing wireless connectivity, or the Hive Mappers providing like a decentralized Google Maps. So yeah, I'll let Sal kick us off, but really looking forward to this conversation, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me and excited for this combo.
Yeah, just echoing what Connor said, we had a really good time grabbing lunch in Puerto Rico a couple of weeks ago. So I wanted to bring you on the podcast, and what you guys are building is one of the most interesting. I've always really admired Cloudflare as a business, just like in my prior life, and CDNs more broadly as one of these businesses that, if you get it right, can have like crazy strong network effects. And so the idea of doing this in a Web3 way, I think, makes a ton of sense, but has been extremely hard to crack for different people to create actually like something that's performant. And you guys have done that, I think, over the past year, like pretty quietly, been something that not a lot of people have heard about. So yeah, I wanted to give you a chance to maybe like tell us just the high level overview of like what Fleek is, how you started it, and where you guys are at today.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I started in the industry back in the 2016, 2017 ICO days. I had started a project out of Consensus that was called Token Foundry. We were kind of like the tokenization arm of Consensus, trying to help just bring some standards and just make it not so much the wild west. I had a background in equity crowdfunding, so it was just a really nice fit. But once the ICO stuff started dying down, me and a few people I'd built Token Foundry with kind of realized we were more interested on like the decentralizing the web side of things, not so much like the decentralizing Wall Street side of the industry. But back then, it was not too many decentralized web infrastructure technologies that had any indication that they had staying power besides IPFS. So that's where we kind of started with Fleek. Um, Around early 2020 is when we launched the first version, which was just IPFS hosting. That's where a lot of people in Web3 know us today. We're a pretty popular option for hosting a lot of the Web3 apps in the ecosystem. Um, the ones who want to host it on IPFS, maybe hook up an ENS name, things like that. But then, we'd always tried to figure out how we could move beyond just like static stuff. We were doing static hosting, static storage. And so we had experimented a lot with different decentralized web infrastructure protocols that we saw coming to market. And just trying to, understand if any of them could sort of fill that gap of, providing that more full stack app, just development experience, and what type of benefits that might offer to developers. And through that process and building on a lot of these protocols, we kind of just noticed, as you pointed out, there's this sort of performance gap in the Web3 stacks. And every Web3 protocol, middleware app, everyone's using Web2 augmentation to get to the performance level that is kind of required by developers and more so by end users using these products. And so, as you mentioned, it became clear that a lot of the existing decentralized web infrastructure protocols were built on a lot of like 2016 blockchain scalability ideas of monolithic chains and being bottlenecked by consensus and needing a global state to come to consensus on. But we saw all these cool innovations happening on the smart contract side of the ecosystem in terms of approaches to scalability and moving a compute off chain, and these new like DAG based consensuses like Narwhal and Bullshark, where you don't necessarily need to come to a global consensus and you could scale a lot easier. And so that's where we kind of just realized that we thought we could apply a lot of those new approaches people were taking for scaling smart contract platforms, which are really good for building like decentralized financial applications and services and use cases, and try to build decentralized web infrastructure protocol that really like took those learnings from the smart contract side of things and applied it to a more web infrastructure use case, and like build a platform that instead of building like decentralized financial services on a smart contract platform, you can maybe build a platform that was really well suited for building decentralized web and edge services that could potentially be as performant or potentially even more performant for certain use cases than Web 2. So that's kind of like the backstory, a little bit of how we got to here, but I'll just pause there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think it kind of like learning about what you guys are doing kind of echoes a trend I think I've seen across Deepin of like it seems like in the Web 2 world, usually like infrastructure is built out before apps, which I think kind of makes sense. It's just like chicken before the egg or vice versa. But um, when we're thinking about like Deepin and like what Deepins are trying to solve or like attacking, it seems like they're usually innovating at the edge first and then like working their way back in the back down the stack. Like wireless connectivity is the example I'm thinking of. Like, you know, Helium is working on kind of edge connectivity as their first kind of core use case or like product that they're trying to serve. And then, and they've been around for, you know, a couple cycles now, but now I'm starting to hear about different projects popping up that are trying to decentralize the kind of wireless connectivity stack, but much further down. So like Andrina is a podcast we just recorded, and they're looking to actually decentralize the backhaul that's between like a data center and a Helium node. So just yeah, interesting to think about how deepins are moving kind of down the stack technically. Um,
Yeah, I would actually say I believe the opposite is true. I don't think Web 2 builds out infrastructure first. I think in Web 2, everybody rents infrastructure. And that's actually one of the problems we're trying to solve for Web 3 is the only options you have right now if you want to build a decentralized web or middleware type protocol is to build your own network. You don't really have many other choices right now, and it takes a very long time to get to market. It's very expensive. It's hard to do. In Web 2, pretty much everyone rents their infrastructure. And that's really the problem Fleek Network is trying to solve is the same way Eigenlayer is trying to let you rent economic security. Fleek Network is really just trying to let you rent performant node infrastructure. So, you know, you can kind of build these like virtual networks because it's the same thing as this whole Alt L1 to L2 migration. The majority of these networks do not garner enough usage to justify having your own siloed node network, and none of them communicate. So to pay for your own siloed, globally distributed node network that isn't geo-optimized, isn't edge optimized, like this is why no one tries to build their own Cloudflare. Everyone just uses a shared performance layer. Like if you look at Web 2, the modern web is all microservices accessed via API, accelerated by a shared performance layer. And in Web 3, you're missing that shared performance layer. And so everyone is essentially just rolling their own, you know, proprietary infra networks before they even have a product, before they even have product market fit. And so that I think is like a problem. And so that's where I think Fleek Network is really going to lower a lot of barriers is because, yeah, like with AVSs, you know, not needing like renting economic security versus building your own is nice, but it's not that hard to launch a token and get the market to value it at a level that you know enables most of these use cases. But like if Fleek Network were to be an AVS, none of the work we've done over the last 2 years would change up until this point. We would still have to build this network, do all the P2P, all the networking. It's pretty hard. So that's where, you know, we're already starting to work with some early AVSs, some other projects where they're running a lot of this infrastructure that powers these networks or these rollups or whatever, you know, the off-chain compute scalability approach is. All of this infrastructure is running on AWS today or Google Cloud or wherever. It's expensive. It's, you know, it's decently performant, but you know, you're paying and renting servers, so you're paying for a lot of unused usage instead of like a serverless model where it's pretty much all usage based pricing and flexible scaling and things like that, and you don't have to worry much about DevOps or any of this infra maintenance or things like that, and time to get to market. So it's like if you want to build, you know, some niche prover service or, you know, like just like you were saying, all these niche little pieces of the infra and web stack that people are trying to decentralize, does every single one of them really need its own siloed infrastructure network? I think no. And I think like building on Fleek Network provides a way better option where you could get better infrastructure than you're going to build yourself, more performant. It's going to be way less expensive than you trying to pay and use your token to subsidize all this infra and validator network that you probably don't need, especially not at the start. And you'll get to market in literally a tenth of the time because we're abstracting all that stuff away. It's like if you think of rollups as like virtual blockchains, you could think of building on Fleek Network as being able to build these like virtual networks. And yeah, that's where I think, like for these other networks going after these very niche parts of the web stack, like their bigger problems are probably like the tech side. If you're going to go build your own network, that's already pretty hard. But now distribution, if you're trying to sell into data centers and stuff, that sounds like a very hard and long sales cycle. So you're going to be paying out all these inflation rewards to your own network in these early days, and you're going to run into the Filecoin problem where you have 99% unused capacity. You're wasting a ton of money. And, it's like that's just not how Web 2 scales. Fleek Network, it's like we just are the capacity of the network is tied to the usage of the network. So if we need more capacity, we will just allow more nodes onto the network the same way Web 2, if they need more capacity, they just open another data center location. So that's where I think, one of the biggest hurdles to building decentralized web infrastructure. And, like you said, everyone's going after all these different parts of the stack, but it's just so much redundant work being done by all these different teams to rebuild these foundational pieces that really, I think, it's the trend you're seeing in Web3. Everything's going modular. Everything is becoming specialized where you can now rent these pieces as a service instead of needing to build them into your own network. And that's what Web 2 really is. You focus on your application or business logic and you outsource the rest. In Web 3, I think we're starting to go in that direction, but I think Fleek Network is a big piece of that missing puzzle where now you actually can rent node infrastructure or whatever infrastructure you need for that work or infra layer of your network or protocol or middleware or whatever or app, and now just get it kind of as a service. And that's really where I think, we're starting to see early traction on just early builders being attracted to Fleek Network.
Hey Harrison, just to play devil's advocate on something you said real quick on redundancy. I think like what we hear from some of these entrepreneurs who are building microservices who are rolling out their own node network is like there's Fleek has sort of a general purpose network of nodes globally that runs microservices at the edge. It may not have the flexibility or customizability. Like I may need have special processes that I want to run at the edge, which are not congruent with like your infrastructure, or like I guess like how do you think about those trade offs between actually how
Yeah, I
general
think
purpose it can be?
so. Well, we don't use a VM, so you can pretty much you could do a lot, but I would say like not everything makes sense to build on Fleek Network. I've been playing with this sort of like, if you remember the old MasterCard saying, like, some things in life money can't buy, for everything else there's MasterCard. Like some things, smart contract platforms or other forms of infrastructure are really good for tokens, NFTs. But for a lot of the other infrastructure, just if you look at the modern web, like, you could rebuild pretty much anything you want using like Lambda or a serverless framework. So similarly, like there's a lot of these networks, there's a lot of these AVSs, there's a lot of these middleware protocols where you could easily rebuild those, just using our JavaScript runtime and CDN, the same way we're demonstrating this Next.js use case. Are there use cases where it doesn't make sense, or parts of your infrastructure? Like you don't need to build everything on Fleek Network, but parts of your infra stack or augmenting your infra stack with Fleek Network will save you a lot of time or get you the performance you're looking for without having to go back on your Web3 ethos and use Cloudflare or Lambdas. So yeah, Fleek isn't going to be this end all be all, every network, every node should run on the network. But what I do think is and let me just pause that so that doesn't make a sound again. But what I do think is I've very rarely come across a protocol, middleware app where there isn't at least one area or piece of their stack that they could benefit from Fleek Network. So yeah, I would say where Fleek Network might succeed more is not seeing full like things built on it, but just like Web 2. Like yeah, maybe use AWS for Lambdas or S3 or EC2, but then maybe you're using some specialized database somewhere else. That's the way I see it playing out. But I do think for the services we're really good at, CDN, edge compute, like those building blocks are pretty core building blocks to a lot of just like web applications or use cases. But yeah, we don't like, for example, some of the early stuff we're POCing with some of the more marquee projects in the space is things like running provers on the network. They're very expensive to run. You have to rent all these servers. You have to rent enough servers, not just for your current capacity, but your max load capacity. So you're renting a bunch of servers that you're using maybe 1% of the time, but you're paying for all of them all the time to be available. And so it does make a lot of sense, but not for every prover, because some provers require a lot of memory. And so, yeah, for those types of provers, those don't make sense to run on Fleek Network. But the trend is going to lower memory requirements, more client-side proving. And so that's where things like having a performant edge network to offload some of that computation and work to makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it won't make sense for every use case. And there are things that, yeah, you probably cannot and should not do on Fleek Network, but that's okay. I think, we want to just stay in our lane and be the performance layer, but we think a performance layer becomes very important to almost every part of the stack and every, type of infrastructure. But yeah, like there will definitely be networks where having some of your own node infrastructure on AWS or other places makes perfect sense. And also to clarify, like Fleek Network does not store data. We've taken an origin agnostic approach. So if you want to store data on S3 in conjunction with your use of Fleek Network, go for it. If you want to use IPFS, you want to use Filecoin, Arweave, you want to use a data availability layer, a smart contract platform, these could all be origins. And we don't really, it doesn't matter to us. That's completely up to the developer. So we really are trying to take a flexibility, because if you look at some of these other protocols on the decentralized web infrastructure side, they're taking the way more EC2 approach. You store here, you compute here, you have your data, but that's not really how the modern web and modern developers build. And so, yeah, that's where, yeah, like Fleek Network might be best used in conjunction with other things rather than Fleek Network by itself. But yeah, certain things, you could definitely just, use there.
Yeah, I'm hearing more kind of like echoes of modularity. I think the whole industry's kind of been like talking about. It's been a big shift this cycle, but I think you hinted at it maybe once or twice, but I just want to kind of differentiate for our listeners. Like when I was doing the research for this pod, I saw you guys have two Twitter accounts. It's like one's for kind of like the Fleek CDN kind of node network, and then the other is kind of for Fleek, the Web3 application like developer platform that I think has a lot of other kind of use cases and tools that are offered there. So maybe if you could differentiate the two, how they work together, kind of what the like broad vision is for those two parts of the business.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's something we still don't know the exact right approach. But I do like the approach Helium has taken with like Helium Network and Helium Mobile. Because, I think too often, like I look at a lot of these other protocols and it's hard for me to understand who they're marketing to. It's like most of them are marketing to like a Web3 investor almost, with the way their homepages and just, products read. But like if you look, I use Helium Mobile as an example for the Web3 audience, but for like the Uber example is really what we try to use, where they use a different infrastructure under the hood, but that is largely ignored in terms of them explaining their product to an end user. They don't want you to understand that really until after you've taken a ride and experienced the product, because it's not important. They're trying to tell you you need a ride and we could get you there. Cheap, fast, good coverage. That's the approach we're trying to take, where Fleek Network is this infrastructure. It's an edge platform. Um, but the Fleek platform is really a developer platform, and where the current homepage is going to look a lot different in about a month from now. But if you read it right now and you're a Web 2 developer, you'd probably think you're in the wrong place. And I think that's the case of most Web 3 projects, especially on the web infrastructure side. Like it's just very unfriendly to a normal developer. So everyone's competing after these 25,000 Web3 developers and ignoring the 25 million Web2 developers for the most part. And so the idea is like the Fleek platform can just compete with these other modern web developer platforms, a Vercel, a Railway, a Render, etc., and offer this full stack of services that you could build apps with edge optimized, super performant, SEO, all those benefits out of the box, low cost, plus none of the corporate nonsense because of the underlying infrastructure. So you don't have to, pricing is transparent, it's all usage based, you don't have to worry about deplatforming, all these things. And seamless DevX, because if you look at how any of these modern platforms have stolen market share from the incumbents, it's seamless DevX, because the number of developers in the world doubles every 5 years. And so, it's, they don't want to use AWS and need a certification to learn how to use a platform to deploy a simple app. They want to link their GitHub, do very little config, and get all the benefits right out of the box. So that's kind of you could consider that like the sort of like productizing and like packaging and distribution layer for the network. But also, like I said, Fleek Network doesn't store data. So the Fleek platform needs to use other technologies, other protocols, maybe both Web 2 and Web 3. But the whole concept is not too dissimilar from Uniswap's app or wallet. It's just an open source resource to help make it easy and to drive distribution to the network, but also to other networks. Whereas the network is more so where, like, there might be use cases that don't make sense to surface in the Fleek platform, but that Fleek network could be used for. For example, like, I don't know, a self-driving car or IoT use case where you need really good global edge coverage because, you got cars on the road and you need, them to communicate with your servers. So you need nearby, edge locations that you can, do that with. And so, or like a Vercel. Everyone thinks we like compete with Vercel, but Vercel is a dream customer of ours, because every other modern dev platform who's edge sort of focused, they're built on top of AWS, because it's the Uber thing. Like, it's not economically feasible for them to go set up infrastructure on their own in all these locations and deal with different jurisdictional and legal things and need to hire people to manage the infra, because 75 to 80% of IT costs are human attributed things. And so when you can run a system like that algorithmically the way Uber has, you could get a lot of cost efficiency in sort of getting rid of all that human management bloat. But so essentially, like, that's where like the network, yeah, like maybe Vercel said, we proved this out. It's performant, it's low cost, and you don't have to worry about any of the corporate kind of nonsense stuff because of the cryptographic and just, underlying, differences and unique parts of being a decentralized network that actually do add benefits, censorship resistance, no risk of deplatforming, all these sorts of things. But yeah, like maybe Vercel wouldn't want to use the Fleek platform, like they just want to use the infrastructure directly. Our goal is the Fleek platform would add value to make them switching their Lambdas to Fleek Edge functions or switching their CDN from Cloudflare to Fleek Network. The idea is that Fleek platform can make doing those things really seamless, easy, one-click migrations. You pay with a card. We abstract the stable payments to the protocol for you, all of that stuff. So you could use the platform like a normal Web 2 dev. You don't have to hear the word blockchain. You don't have to hear the word DPIN. That word has lost all its meaning, in my opinion. I don't even want to call ourselves a DPIN anymore. I'd rather start a new acronym and call it WIN, Decentralized Web Infrastructure Networks, because every time I see the word DPIN now, it's like so butchered. It feels like the word blockchain in 2017. Like, it almost feels like it's a negative signal to see that word if a project is really pushing it in their marketing. We're the DPIN hub, or we're this or we're that. I have no clue what that means. So I consider us a decentralized web infrastructure network. And so that's really where, like, the network itself is an edge optimized cloud infrastructure, but we want 100 Fleeks built on top of this network and to surface this infrastructure. So any Web3 developer platform, any Web2 developer platform, those aren't, maybe they were competitors to the old Fleek, but now those are our best potential partners and customers. So just, we don't want to force everyone like through the Fleek platform and make it seem like this is a network just for the Fleek platform, because it's not. We're just the first customer and builder on top of this network who's planning to leverage the infrastructure for our own use cases and products, and just for it's better for us than running the stuff we're running on AWS or DigitalOcean or anywhere else. It's cheaper, better performing edge or serverless compute. It's a very performant, very reliable CDN. like a lot of the infrastructure that not only our customers use, but Fleek itself uses, we actually see benefits in moving to Fleek Network. So the idea is, like, we just want to use Fleek, and it's going to be completely open source before we go to mainnet. But that just as an example. So like, but yeah, we don't want to force other developer platforms, because yeah, they might feel weird. Like, and that's part of the reason all services on Fleek Network are priced in USD stables. You don't have to know there's a Fleek token. You don't have to touch a Fleek token if you're a developer who wants to use the network. And I think that's why a lot of these other decentralized web infrastructure protocols struggle. Because if you want another protocol to put some of their infrastructure on your network, but now they got to buy the token and they got to, do all these things, it sends a weird signal to their own community, And so like, that's where, like, I think we've had the benefit of watching a lot of other protocols and the mistakes that were made to really, try to make this as easy as possible and remove as much friction as possible. So you just get down to the basics. Does it perform well? Is it a better cost? And, like, can we just compete on merit? So yeah, I don't know if that helped explain, but we don't know the best way to handle it. Do you go with a unified brand like Uniswap and it's a hard thing. But they are two very different things. And so we feel for now it's better, even if it causes a little bit confusion, to sort of force that bifurcation to show this is separate. This is a decentralized network. Anyone could build on it. It's permissionless. You could build whatever use cases you want. Fleek is going to focus on these use cases, full stack web development. But yeah, maybe there's IoT or other things that make no sense in the context of the Fleek platform. And we don't want to pigeonhole anything and give anyone else every opportunity to say, hey, you could build something like the Fleek platform and integrate this functionality or new functionality yourself into whatever, user experience and interface and or platform you want.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Sal in a sec, but I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to bifurcate the two, and it's a model like I've seen in a lot of other DPINs. I know you don't love that word, but just like who's going to be doing the BD and the not the customer service, but like who's going out to the market doing the business development, like building some of the first use cases on top of the decentralized network, and there's usually a difference between the two, and it might even like help in the future, like once the network's grown more, to like just change the name of Fleek, right? Have Fleek the kind of BD first kind of customer use case builder, have a different name in the Fleek network to retain the core underlying kind of naming of things. I think that's what Helium did with Nova Labs, and Helium Mobile is like slightly different. So just an idea for the future.
It's definitely something we've discussed. It's definitely something, like that I think lawyers would love. But we do feel that, like, it is a hard one. Like, Helium called Helium Mobile still Helium Mobile. It doesn't really use the Helium network right now. It's just an MVNO on top of T-Mobile. But they seem to think that there was some benefit to the brand recognition. Like, because like when you think about Uber, it's not like they have a separate brand for the driver network, but obviously it's a different setup. That's like a CPIN network, a centralized physical infrastructure network. Um, but when you think about Uber, you think of it all. So like what we're trying to get to is the point where when you think about Fleek, all you think is it's just an edge optimized cloud platform. If Vercel is the front end cloud, like Fleek's just the, edge optimized cloud. And sure, it's decentralized, but that's not really that important. Like, we're just an performant cloud platform to build web and host web infrastructure and apps on. And so that should encompass everything. The same way Vercel encompasses their AWS infrastructure and their developer platform. And so that is the place we would like to get to. But yeah, there are regulatory considerations. There are things, because we are completely separate. Like, the Fleek Foundation and the network has their own stuff. But we do think for now, everyone, like, they know Fleek. We've got a pretty solid user base, and they like Fleek, and it's got a good brand. So it does feel like it would be but Vercel rebranded from Zeit to Vercel, not too long ago, and it worked out pretty well. So I definitely think it's something we would consider, especially to make it very clear they're two separate. For now, it just felt like there was benefits to at least, keeping things all Fleek for now, and just doing our best to handle the bifurcation elsewhere. But yeah, it is a challenge, I would say. Oh, but to answer your question, we are taking a slightly different approach to distribution than most protocols. And that is part of the strategy with the Fleek platform. Is most of these other protocols' approach to growth, it's like they saw what worked for like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which was like, we'll build it and then they will come and everyone else will build these other parts of the ecosystem and distribution chain out for us. But now there's so many protocols that doesn't really work. And so, I don't know if the hackathon BD strategy, like, I'm sure it's effective to a certain degree, but if you look at SaaS, which every single one of these protocols are just dressed up a little bit differently, product driven distribution is really where businesses succeed, And so if you look at Cloudflare, 96% of their customers don't pay a thing. They just have a huge top of funnel where they get people in on a free to use self-serve product, and they see the ones that are actually using it a lot, and then those are the ones they convert to enterprise deals and add other support and things that they make money on. And so that's really our approach. Is we do talk to projects, and that's part of our strategy for protocol development, is really talking with projects and understanding the use cases that they think the network could support within their infrastructure stack, and then we build these new core components to support new use cases. But once we build those once, any other developer has, so like if we build a core component or components and a service that supports a ZK prover use case, that should be applicable to pretty much any or several ZK provers. Or at least if you build one ZK prover of this type, then anyone using that prover or building on that rollup framework, or any rollup as a service provider who needs to run that prover to support rollups building on that framework, those are all potential customers. And so we are taking a more like product-driven protocol development strategy, where we're letting the data and the usage dictate what features Fleek builds. But Fleek, as I mentioned, is only focused on the ones that are applicable to like this sort of Vercel railway type developer platform, where you could just host a bunch of different infrastructure. We make it very easy and it's very performant, like the Next.js app hosting use case we're going to demonstrate next month. That's something we built. That's one of the first use cases Fleek platform built on top of the network and some of these early services like the CDN and the JS runtime. But like I said, there's people already starting to build provers, or some of these early AVSs are figuring out ways they could leverage just that JavaScript runtime and CDN to offload parts of their stack to the network, get those edge benefits, get that performance. So yeah, we are mixing in some BD, but the real strategy here is, can we as Fleek platform learn how to package and productize these new services and resources? Like if Ethereum sells block space, like Fleek sells compute and bandwidth to start. And so what the Fleek platform needs to become very good at is, how do we package the same way Vercel is. They're saying, hey, AI is a big opportunity, so we're going to spend our resources to build new products and abstractions and flows to help people build AI apps. So that's really what we're doing, is we're saying, hey, we got this new infrastructure, it's performant, it's low cost, it's got all these benefits. Now, how can we package this into products and use cases that add real value to developers and solve real problems? And so that's really what we're trying to prove out now. And that's where, as Fleek platform, we're taking, the BD approach, but also a much more product-driven distribution and self-service approach, because that's how Fleek has worked till now. And those products are beautiful, is when you don't have to talk to anyone, you don't have to sign contracts, and people could just find your product, start using it in 30 seconds, and, get the benefits, and eventually, like be real users and drive real usage to the protocol, whether it's for compute or CDN usage or just Next.js app hosting. Because at the end of the day, it all boils down to all those services, all those use cases are using resources from the network. So the better we could get at productizing and getting new products and use cases in front of developers and making it easy to use, that's really the strategy we have. And I think any protocol that does not have a platform and, really like doing that type of growth strategy is going to struggle, because I think like BD and that, is a lot harder.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I'm gonna do the devil's advocate thing again, Harrison, and ask you, like, one of the questions we always get trying to raise a DPIN fund is like, or I think crypto investors get in general from the smart LPs is like, oftentimes the overhead of adding verification, like sort of like out can, depending on how you structure it, can outweigh a lot of the benefits that you get of decentralization, and I think that's what's driving a lot of the like performance gaps that we see in Web3 across a bunch of different categories. You guys just did this like phase three, or have done a couple of test nets. And the latest one, you have this chart where it's like Amazon was on the order of like 300 milliseconds on a time to first byte basis. Vercel, I think, was like 100, and you guys were sub 50. Just like if you can explain like how that's possible, or like how do you solve this? Like you have to have some incremental handshake or verification to this in a permissionless way, right? So how are you able to reduce it even beyond that?
Yeah, well, so I would say on the bandwidth side, there's an article that's coming out probably tomorrow, where the lead dev on Fleek Network essentially goes very in depth on our implementation of just Blake 3 hashing, and how that essentially on the bandwidth sides allows us to verify bandwidth in real time, because all the data is streamed. So any bad bit of data we can immediately catch. The client, SDK just immediately would reject it, and a new node would deliver it. So the client app would have very little idea, but the slashing, all that would happen in the background. On the compute side, it's harder. By default, we've taken the approach of compute is unverified by default. So there's a lot of the world's compute that 95 or 99% of the world's compute probably does not need ZK verification, but so, and just the way the reputation system and things work in Fleek Network, the crypto economics, and just like the way the system is set up with the reputation system for how work gets allocated. Because work in Fleek Network, nothing is allocated on stake amounts. It's all based on a performance-based reputation score and your location. Because the network, like, this is a real, I think, like physical infrastructure network, because the work is very local. Like a node in California would be serving requests to people using apps that are using Fleek Network in California. And so it is a real like DPIN network. That's why I feel like the term has lost its meaning a little bit, because that's what I think really makes a DPIN network, is when the work is somehow correlated to the physical world, meaning like nodes are performing work in that region, and so on and so forth. That's at least how I kind of think about it. But what I would say is on the compute side, you could build any type of verification you want on top of that unverified compute. So take the edge functions, for example. You could set up a simple consensus-based compute verification scheme. And you could say, I want 3 responses, and I only accept it as true if all 3 of those match. You could customize it however you want. It's very simple. We'll have templates, so you could easily do it in a click, or a simple few lines of code. But essentially, because of the way Fleek Network works, adding that scheme wouldn't add any performance lag, because you would just get 3 responses within those latencies. So it's not like you would have to wait for one, then wait for another. So that is probably the simplest form of verified compute you could do on Fleek Network. It would be just as fast. It would be a little bit more expensive. So the goal is to be at least half the price of cloud platforms on compute, because like I said, they're like AWS Lambdas are marked up at least 5x over cost. Like when you decentralize and you get the cost of these resources more closer to the hardware and electricity to run them, that's where we think like we could get significant cost savings. It's like Pocket Network being 80% cheaper than Infura, because Infura is built on AWS most likely, and Pocket Network is bare metal. And that's why Infura's free tier uses Pocket, because it's cheaper for them to use Pocket than their own infrastructure. So it makes business sense. So for a lot of the same reasons, Pocket is cheaper than centralized alternatives built on cloud platforms. We think Fleek Network is going to have a similar advantage, especially on the compute side. Bandwidth, you're sort of at the mercy of the L1 network providers in your region, and that's why a lot of cloud platforms have regional bandwidth pricing. But on the compute side, yes, that would be cheap. So even with a simple 3 or 5 verification scheme, whatever you were comfortable with based on how important and critical it is to verify the results of that data, you would still probably be cheaper or in line with AWS or other cloud platform costs, but you'd still be at least 10,000x cheaper than ZK, and extremely performant. if you want to build ZK compute on Fleek Network, you can. That, like with the provers and some of the work we're doing, like that's exactly what you could do, and it would still be cheaper than doing it on Google Cloud, because like I said, now you could switch to usage-based pricing. You get the edge benefits, so it's performant. But yeah, it's like, some of these provers are spending six figures or more a month to run these provers. So that's like a huge cost, and that's the biggest bottleneck to roll up scalability right now, especially on the ZK side. And so that's where I think like that was the approach we took. Like, we don't want a VM, we don't want to box anything in. We're building at a lower layer. A lot of these protocols are really platforms. They have a VM. It's a specific execution environment. Fleek Network is really trying to be like infrastructure orchestration. We're trying to be a layer below, because that's what I'm saying. A lot of these networks, oh, cool, you want to use a different VM? Do you really need your own network just for this VM? Really? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And that's why, since rollups and L2s have come around, you still see alt L1s, but it's a lot less. You see a lot more L2s than you see L1s, because it just makes way more sense. If you become a huge L2, sure, then think about maybe becoming an L1 and rolling your own infra. That's how Web 2 does it. Rent to start. If you become big enough to justify your own network, then roll off Fleek Network and roll your own network. That's totally cool if it makes business sense. That's what people do once they outgrow AWS or something. So that's kind of how we think about it. But yeah, that's how we approach the verification, is unverified to start. If you're just hosting an Next.js app, or you just need to query the weather or something for a simple, weather app, you could probably rely on just the crypto economics and the way the protocol works, and you're going to be fine. And we have systems in place where even if you get a bad result, we could catch it very quickly and it would be almost, undetectable. But if you need higher verification, the protocol is set up where you could add whatever level of verification you want, and you have complete optionality. You want simple consensus-based compute and keep the performance? Great. If you want ZK and go all the way, you could do that too. And we still think it'll provide better benefits to do that type of compute on Fleek Network versus, doing it on Google Cloud or, wherever these other, platforms are currently doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. One last question from me before I hand it over to Connor Harrison. It's like I know we're joint investors in a company called Opacity that's working on ZK TLS, which is one of the like use cases I've been excited about. That can potentially use your guys' infra. Like, what are some of the cool or novel like sort of like projects that you could see built, that you're excited to see built on top of Fleek?
So I do think the whole AVS, group of projects is a perfect, just because they're already comfortable with rent versus build. Okay, this makes sense. Maybe they're doing it for Ethereum alignment reasons. I'm sure, or there's a lot of marketing benefit to being in AVS right now, which I'm sure is driving things too. But it's a cool. Eigenlayer is an awesome project. And like even Fleek Network, like we still are not 100% like, we're waiting to see how things play out, because it is an interesting sort of proposition, even for a network like Fleek. Like, okay, what makes more sense, doing this or having our own security and not relying on any external? But like, yeah, for a lot of those, you could build that AVS business or app logic in on as a Fleek Network just service or use case, like just using, like I said, the edge functions. We're going to be rolling out some other cool stuff. But that's a perfect example, like with the ZK TLS, that's where like we had already kind of had plans to add the SGX component to nodes, because for a lot of enterprise use cases, like you need to deal with like secrets or access or API keys to a database or something. And so that's just like you can't do that on Fleek Network as by default, because the nodes would be able to see it, and it opens up to a lot of things. So in order to enable use cases like that and make Fleek Network really compatible with Web 2, the SGX component added to nodes gives you, it's not going to be like general private compute. It's going to be, a scope to very specific use cases, like a key value store or stuff like that, that enables this additional functionality and opens you up to a way more ability for enterprises and Web 2 businesses to use the protocol. But yeah, there's a lot of these, like, just, I'd say anyone sitting in the decentralized middleware category, There's just a lot of these networks like Gelato Network. Well, they've now pivoted to a RAS platform, but if you remember, they started and they were going to build a network just for Web3 functions, and serverless functions as a network. Yeah, I don't think you need your own network just to do cloud functions. That's a perfect use case of something that you could build on Fleek Network. We already have better performance than your current infra running on Google Cloud or AWS. So but I want to prove things out more before I go ask a project like that to, hey, go move all your infra onto Fleek Network. But that's the direction we're moving into. Or something like Bundler. That's just, they're moving in a different direction going after provenance. But if the original Bundler project of just bundling Arweave, and putting them on chain later, but giving you that instant sort of CID, so you kind of your front end can load fast and the user thing, those types of services are easy. All right, do you really, because all those services, it started with the graph. The graph got product market fit first, and then spent 5 years trying to build a decentralized version of it. Whereas most of their users 5 years later are just like, can we just go back to the hosted version because it was easier to use, and they've done a lot of great work, and they were the first ones, and it was hard. It's hard to build the decentralized version of that centralized product that worked extremely well back in 2017, 2018 when they first launched it. That is the approach most of these decentralized infrastructure, everyone, a lot of projects claim they're decentralized when most of them today are not. They're all running on AWS, Google Cloud or Cloudflare. They probably have good intentions and plans to decentralize until they get to the point of actually needing to build that decentralized version, and they realize, wow, this is extremely hard and it's going to take us a ton of time, and I'm not even sure it's going to be performant enough to work. And that's really where I think Fleek Network is trying to fill a gap, to say, hey, that product is great. You don't have to go build your own network. You could just move it here, and now it is decentralized. You're fully in control, and it's just like building a rollup or a smart contract protocol on top of, Ethereum. You don't have to worry about DevOps anymore. Just worry about your application logic. Outsource the infrastructure layer, and if you want a token and building on Fleek Network, we don't stop you from doing that whatsoever. You can monetize at the layer above, just like you monetize at the layer above AWS. All your nodes are running on AWS. Your nodes are paying AWS, and then you're paying your nodes differently above the infrastructure layer. That's how every Web2 business works today, basically. And so we are not changing that equation at all. We're just replacing the AWS or Cloudflare layer of your stack, pretty much. That's all we're really doing here. So it's not like, oh, if you build on Fleek Network, now you can't have your own token, or you can't be an AVS, or you can't be a, micro rollup or a roll app or any of these, frameworks. Yes, you can. You could be all those things, because right now, to build any of those things, they tell you to go deploy it on AWS. That is where the execution runs today. So all we're trying to say is, hey, yeah, so any AVS, any rollup, any, project that's currently running the execution on AWS or another cloud platform, those are the low-hanging fruit ones. But yeah, we're doing cool POCs. Like I said, the prover, we're doing another one where we're POCing running the data availability sampling infrastructure for a protocol on Fleek Network. It's fun right now because there's not many conversations we go into where there's not a piece of their stack that they're trying to decentralize for regulatory reasons, or legal reasons, or just Web3, just decentralization reasons, or they're just trying to save money on a piece of their infrastructure that's costing a lot right now. But like you said, not many other decentralized web infrastructure protocols, no protocol today can performantly host and serve a Next.js application. They can convert it to a static Next.js file and host a static version, but when you do that, you lose all the Next.js benefits of edge functions, server-side rendering, incremental static regeneration, image optimization, all these things that make Next.js great. There's not a single protocol that could run a full Next.js app performantly today. So next month will be the first protocol that really demonstrates that. And I think that's when things get really exciting, because we're adding net new value to the Web3 infrastructure stack and new use cases that just weren't possible before. And yeah, I think verified bandwidth is a cool primitive that, I'm excited to see what people do with that. But yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff I'm excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super promising. I mean, along with that, I think we have got a couple minutes left here. Just want to ask you one more question and then do a quick lightning round.
Sure.
But last question being, you're in testnet right now, showing some really promising results. I just want to ask the question I'm sure a lot of people are curious about. When mainnet, when token, and kind of what do you see the token doing maybe on the supply and demand side at a high level?
Yeah, so the plan is to launch this official testnet next month. That'll be a long running testnet that you could actually build with Fleek Network in production apps at that point. Like if you want to host the Next.js app, you could do it. The infrastructure will be reliable, pretty much like production grade, and so that'll be exciting. And we'll have the basically the JavaScript runtime, the edge functions, the CDN. So those are some cool building blocks that you could, like I said, already build almost a lot of things with, but we're going to continue like the SGX capabilities that'll be surfaced in some sort of capacity. And the team is working on some database stuff, Node.js runtimes, Docker, things like that, to just really make it easy to get a lot of existing infrastructure over to get the benefits of the network with very little code changes or migration headaches. We're shooting to do that testnet phase for like 6 months and launch mainnet in October. But yeah, as I mentioned, like all services, everything is priced in USD stables on the network, so you could do real easy price comparisons to existing cloud platforms. But the token is purely on the node operator side, so it's a lot like a taxi medallion. You just need it to stake to become an operator on the network. But like I said, the number of operators is limited, and it's based off of the capacity ratio to usage of the network and some sort of like multiplier for like DDoS attack handling and things, because Fleek Network's like amazing at things like DDoS prevention because of the number of nodes and IP addresses we could distribute traffic to. But we use there's a project called Chainflip, but they do this auction system. And so that's where the token is based. So let's say to start, we say, okay, there's 2,000 nodes as the starting coverage we want. That gives us good throughput, good capacity, good global coverage. So then basically the 2,000 highest staked nodes by auction amount would be the active set. And so if we then get usage and want to add nodes, then there would just be nodes added. So now, the top 5,000 nodes by auction amount would go into the system. And I think it's a really elegant model because then you don't put this artificial cap on the number of useful tokens. If you just said, hey, we want 2,000 nodes and it's 10 FLK or 10,000 FLK per node, then you kind of have this limited universe of tokens that are useful within the network. There might be additional functionality added to the token, but that to start is as simple as it will be. And yeah, I'd say the nice part about that is if you're a developer, and you don't care about tokens or Web3 at all, like you don't have to know about it. It's completely abstracted away and not a part of the developer flow or experience at all. It's like riding a taxi. Like you don't even know what a taxi medallion is. Like you just get in the car, you pay with cash or credit card, and you don't have to know or understand anything about taxi medallions. And that's kind of the way we're approaching things. But yeah, it's where my experience with Token Foundry and trying to build proper token models and network launches and things, I think that experience is finally going to be useful for the launch of Fleek Network and the token model and distribution.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, sweet. Thanks for sharing all that. Just got a lightning round left, which should be real quick. So yeah, I'll just throw a kind of topic at you, and just whether it's a one-word answer, a couple sentences. Just curious, kind of your thoughts on that. So first up, we've got the Bitcoin halving tomorrow. What are you thinking about when you think about the Bitcoin halving?
I think it's fun. I think the fact it's happening on 420 or close to 420 is, it feels like we're definitely in a simulation.
That's what I thought.
But yeah.
100%. Yeah. What about the meme coin mania that's kind of taken over this cycle very early on? It seems.
Um, I think it's fascinating. And I saw someone had a take this week that said um, something like meme coins are the new NFTs, and it really is. And it's it's fascinating, and it's also scary. It's the first time I felt old, where I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Um, and so, yeah, I'd say, yeah, fascinating and scary.
For sure.
The next
Yeah.
one
Maybe
is crypto and PR. I want to ask you: is Puerto Rico Ethereum aligned, or what's the deal with the Puerto Rico crypto crowd?
Um, I'm sort of like you, where I'm in Rincon most of the time, and there's only a few crypto people on that side. But from what I see, I'd say it's actually pretty eclectic. Um, I'd say you got good. You definitely have good Ethereum representation. There's a lot of consensus people and uh, and just that crowd down there. But there's definitely a decent Solana crowd there, Filecoin crowd, Cosmos crowd, some Polkadot people. So I like it. I actually, when I do go to the meetups in Puerto Rico, I learn more about other ecosystems than anywhere else. I go to meetups because, yeah, I do feel like there's good representation there, and there's smart people who can actually like speak elegantly about these other just ecosystems. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, you said earlier the meme coin kind of mania makes you feel old. You've been working in crypto for a couple cycles. Like what's that experience been like?
Humbling, um, but also it's I think it's what makes crypto great. So yeah, I'd say with each passing one, I feel like you know more, but then at the same time, you feel like you know nothing. Um, because who could have? It's like this cycle. It's like, oh, I don't know. It feels different. You got Bitcoin reaching new all-time highs before the halvening. You've got alts just completely dying right now. Like, it's like things. I feel like every cycle is the same, but also every cycle is completely different. And yeah, I think that's what keeps crypto so exciting. Like, are NFTs going to have a second run? Who knows? Maybe meme coins just completely, eliminate them, and everyone's crypto punks and stuff are going to zero. And it's like, all right, well, I guess we're gonna find out one way or another. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's just been amazing to see how much the industry has grown. So yeah, it feels like crypto and Web3 has finally reached like a tipping point, and I think that's what makes this cycle so exciting. Is like, okay, now it's not like an if anymore. It's just like when and how is this going to play out?
For sure. And it's been cool to learn about how you guys are playing a part in all that. Yeah, last lightning round topic here is Web3 gaming. So I saw a tweet or a couple of tweets where I think you're involved with a gaming studio somehow, and there's a game called Golden Tides that looked pretty cool. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Web3 gaming and Golden Tides and some of the other games in that studio?
Yeah, so it's a Fleek gaming studio right now. It is about to spin out, but it I just it kind of happened last bull run. Things were crazy. Before Fleek Network, like we were kind of like a product studio a bit. So we had a lot of things going on. We had come from like the internet computer ecosystem. I was pretty bullish on them for a while, and I thought they could serve this layer of the stack that sort of Fleek Network is now going after. We're the largest builder on the internet computer. Like, we started with IPFS and Filecoin, then realized that wasn't going to meet our needs. Then we kind of went to the internet computer when that launched, thought maybe that would meet the needs. It's more full stack. So we built like the MetaMask of the internet computer. It's called Plug Wallet. We built like the Uniswap. It was called Sonic. We built like a lot of the core infrastructure there early. But then, kind of what I mentioned, we just realized they had some fatal flaws and they were never going to be able to reach the performance that would make a Web 2 developer, use it or replace their existing infrastructure with, along with some other problems. And that's kind of where the idea for Fleek Network kind of came from. But yeah, I would say, what was the initial question? I actually
yeah, no, you're good. What thoughts on Web3 gaming, I guess, broadly, and also Golden Tides?
But yeah, so when we were a product studio, the game was one of the projects we had. And then when we realized we wanted to go after Fleek Network, we essentially cut and gave away everything else. So we handed over all the other projects, but the one that we thought had the most potential was Golden Tides. And so we kept that and basically just kind of with the Series A and stuff, and talked with investors. And also at that time, Web3 gaming sort of fell off a cliff from like a funding standpoint. So we just were in a position where we said we think if we continue to just build this, it's going to be worthwhile. And just like the Fleek platform is a use case for Fleek Network, we think gaming is a big opportunity where Fleek Network can add a lot of value to certain parts of the stack, not all. Like networking for gaming is very complex. And so like, I don't think you could do that on Fleek Network, maybe, way down the road. But yeah, that's exactly where like, there's certain things I don't think Fleek Network is good for, and that's perfectly fine. But there's other parts of the gaming stack that we do think Fleek Network could be really well suited for. And so it's cool that it gives us like this completely different use case where we have a very in-depth understanding of the stack and can start to figure out use cases. And, so it gives us like another shot on goal in a completely different but big category where we can now, but yeah, I think Golden Tides is a really awesome game. It's also under the radar. But they've done a fantastic job, especially they've spent $0 on marketing. And the game looks fantastic and it launches very soon. And yeah, I do think that's going to be one of the cooler Web3 games that launches this year. So yeah, I'm very excited about that one. And I'm very excited about Web3 gaming in general. I do 100% agree that I think Web3 is all about just the financialization of things that weren't financialized before. And I think gaming with the, just global user gaming base and, adding a financial layer to that, we're just starting to see with like decentralized social and Farcaster and stuff, like how that could add net new value to those existing experiences and platforms. And yeah, I think gaming is just I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this decade, a decent portion of the world's workforce was earning their living through playing games or something that felt like a game, like scrolling social media could, potentially fall in that category if you were monetizing it. But yeah, that's I think that trend is for certain. So yeah, it's cool to see it like start to take shape.
For sure. Yeah. Well, Harrison, that's all of our questions for today. Thank you so much for coming on. This was super interesting conversation. Where should we point listeners to on the internet to learn more about Fleek and yourself?
Yeah, I'd say probably Twitter is the best place for now. So we have the Fleek_net handle for like Fleek Network related stuff, and then the Fleek XYZ handle for more of the platform developer stuff. But yeah, I'd say that's best for now. But yeah.
Sweet.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll tag everything in the notes so people know. Thanks, Harrison.
Thank you guys so much. And yeah, really appreciate the thoughtful questions and the background you guys did. You guys did an awesome job.